What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hardcore Fab Shop. I've been working on Old Crow over here behind you guys, and I got to the point where I'm ready to get the marker lights working on top of the roof. Now, I was able to do that pretty easily here on Hookers and Blow, and it's basically the same style of light over there on that truck, so I didn't have time when I did these to be able to show you guys what it takes to be able to get those working, but I figured today I would take some time and show you guys how to make these things function, because I think personally they look a lot better when they have the original patina and style of the truck, and everything all matches way better than it would if you just put some new plastic junk up there. So if you're interested in that and you want to see what it takes to get them fixed and working, stick around in the video, because I think that adds a lot to the truck when you get them working, especially when you're rolling around at nighttime. Alright, so let's get started on this deal. So I guess I should say right off the bat, full disclosure, I already have a couple of these done and was almost to the point to get started on the last one here when I realized that I should be making a video for you guys, because I know that there's got to be some other guys out there that need to know this information to get their lights working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from scratch, even though I can't start with scratch from the lights that I've got here on Old Crow. We'll finish with those, but there's one thing I wanted to show you guys real quick first right off the bat, and that's with this marker light here, and that is how to get these things apart. Now, so they come right off the cab with a couple of bolts here that are carriage bolts through the top of the cab, and then they just got a nut on the bottom side. The nuts come off pretty easy, usually because this stuff is here underneath the roof, so it's not getting any weather or anything to speak of at all. So typically that's not a problem, but these outer shells end up getting stuck to these bottom shells in here, and it's kind of a pain to get them apart. A lot of times I had to fight a lot of it with the Hookers and Blow over there trying to get those apart, I know for sure. So I wanted to show you guys what I came up with for a way to be able to get these apart without having to stick a screwdriver in there and try to pry the tops off and bend everything all up and make it look like crap. So what I found is, if you see right there on the edge, there's enough of a lip sticking out right there that if you take a block or something that's got a nice sharp edge onto it and it's pretty solid, you can take the light and you can just sit just that little lip right on that block, let the rest of it hang over, and then give it a few taps here on the glass. These glasses are pretty strong, so you don't have to worry about breaking them, but you can give it a few taps right there, and usually then at that point the outer shell just pops right off. So it should go without saying that when I was saying tap on it, I was meaning with my hand, not with a hammer or something like that. There we go, come apart. Pretty easy, way easier than trying to stick a screwdriver in there, like I said, and you don't mess up with the whole edge and have this thing looking all crazy. So now that you got that apart, you see there's going to be obviously a bunch of crust and rust in there. There's our carriage bolt that I was talking about, and the lens just comes right out, and there's paper in there for some reason. Boy, that looks like that was almost a fire hazard. They all this old crappy paper in there right around the bulb that broke, and yeah. Alrighty then, well, luckily trash can is right here, and there's our other carriage bolt, our little broken bulb. So what we're trying to actually get to here is this little socket right here that this bulb goes into. And this one actually doesn't look nearly as bad as the ones that were on Old Crow. This one might actually maybe be functional if a guy was to try and clean it up a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and change it or show you how to change it or whatever anyways. So they're just a one wire deal. The wire just pushes right up out through the bottom, and I just cut the wire off with a set of dikes underneath the cab when I took those off, so that's not a big deal. But bolts out of there too. There's a little spring loaded thing in there usually, which I don't see the spring part on this one. Oh, there's a little tiny spring around the end of that. So the new ones I got are a little bit different than that, but not much. So now you've got just your base piece here, you've got your socket there, and the way it works is you've got power coming in through this wire, and it uses the housing as a ground. And in there lies our problem, because if this is supposed to be our ground and it's that rusty, then we're obviously going to have some issues. So you can go in here and you can clean up around the bolt holes where it bolts on. That's not too big of a deal. But where it's a problem is around the socket area. The socket just is on a spot there that's got a hole, and the socket just pushes through the hole, and the metal around that area is what conducts through and makes your ground. So if it gets rusty up in there, then you have to have the socket out to be able to clean up the rust. But the problem there is that the socket is just pushed in through a hole, and on the back side they kind of just mushroom the piece that goes through the hole over, and it's basically just kind of riveted in place. So you can't just take this out, clean it up, stick it back in. You actually have to get a new socket, and you actually have to put it back in there and kind of fold over the edges. So the best way that I have found to get this out is just to go ahead and drill the end of it right there. So I'm going to stick the part that we're taking off right here in my vise. I can just hold it with that, and then I can just take a drill and drill the end of it a little bit. Now we don't want to go too far on this because we don't want to get into our housing. Alright, I think I'm pretty much there. There might be just a little bit of a lip there left, but it should break off at this point, I think. So, and there we go, one socket removed. So yeah, now that we got this thing apart, it's pretty doubtful that it would have actually had any kind of contact happen in there, because that is pretty well just solid rust underneath where that socket was at. It's also kind of fun now that we've got both of these apart to kind of look at these side by side and see this one is a Chevy and this one is a Ford. They're basically the same thing, other than maybe the Ford's a little cheaper the way they made the little tab stick up there and kind of have the light bolted on. But I think the bolt holes are basically in the same spot, and they're almost identical in size and shape. I think the only difference really would be is that maybe the Ford one is a little bit flatter. Ford on this side, Chevy on this side, so might be a little bit more roll in the roof on a Chevy, but I think overall you probably could interchange those if the guy really wanted to. So I guess we're done now with the Chevy one, because we're building a Ford now, not a Chevy. So we need to take this one, we need to get it all cleaned up and clean all this rust off of here so we can get started setting it up for our new socket to go through. So I'm going to sit it here in my vise. I'm not going to put any sort of tension on it at all because I don't want to mess it up, but just enough there to kind of hold it in place, give it a little bit of support underneath this tab, and then I'm just going to take my grinder. It's got a cutoff wheel on there now, so pretty precise, and I can get in there and just kind of clean that up real quick. The one thing I'm seeing here as I'm grinding is that this isn't flat, and I don't want to take and grind off any material that I don't need to, so I'm going to flatten it out with just the hammer and the vise edge here. It's not very much off, but it's just off enough to where, like I said, I just didn't want to take off any more metal than I had to. Now I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. I was playing around with getting that screw out there too while I was off camera there. Alright, so for our new socket, it is from Handy Pack, and it is part number HP4745. I also had some standard ones, I believe was the name brand, on the ones that I put on Hookers and Blow. Looked just like this one, probably made by the same Chinese company with a different label on it. Anyways, here's our light socket, and then here's the wire, and that's that spring I was talking about. You have to have the spring in there of some sort so you can get the light bulb to press in and actually hook inside the little hooks that are on the side there. So we'll set this to the side for now. And to install these, what I've done is I found a socket that fits nice and tight inside the light socket. So now I have that to hold it, and I'm just going to take it, I put it on an extension, put it in my vise, and I might have to be over here to the side. Put it in the vise to hold it. That's going to block the view for you guys. Let me put it on this side. Put it in the vise to hold it, and then I can just take and sit this right down over the top of that. It's a pretty tight fit, but it'll go. Now, to get this thing kind of started and set in place, yeah, it's not quite down. I'm going to tap that down just a little bit there. Okay, so now we've got that down tight on that socket. I'm going to take this punch. The punch is tapered. I'm going to put it in the hole in the end and kind of get this thing to start to flare out and fill in the hole. Okay, that's got her flaring out pretty good there. Work this back out. Now I can take and just kind of fold that edge over a little bit like it was on the original one. Nice and tight. Yeah, that's embarrassing. I was worried about getting you guys a good shot instead of paying attention to what I was actually doing. And yeah, I just screwed that all up. What do you guys notice different there? Okay, so I guess I'm going to have to get another socket, and I guess I'm going to have to take this one out and put a new one in there. Alright, I got my screw up fixed. I got all of my sockets now in the right orientation to where they'll go underneath the lens. So our next thing that we need to address is cleaning up these holes around here where the bolts are going to go through, because that's going to be where our ground is going to end up going through for our cab. So what I did on that is I just took a little stone in the end of the drill. Not trying to be too aggressive or anything, but just enough to knock off all the big chunkies. And I did that with that, and then I finished it up with just some sandpaper on my finger. So something along that lines. Got that good enough where I think it's going to get a good ground. That's all I'm really going for at this point, is just to get a good ground. I suppose if you wanted to, you could actually blast this part if you wanted to and paint it all up or whatever, because you're not going to see most of this. All you'll see is maybe a little tiny bit of a lip on the bottom here on the edge. So wouldn't matter one way or another what you want to do there, but for me, this is all I feel like I need to do. So now I need to show you guys the last step, and the last step is just to get some rubber cut to be able to fit in here and kind of seal this thing all up so that we don't have water coming in the cab with us. So we've got our lens here that goes on top, covers up our bulb. There's a big giant hole here where the wire goes through, and then there's a hole underneath it, and then of course where the bolt's at. So we definitely want a gasket in there on that so we can seal that up. So what I did to begin with on that is I've got this big piece of bulk rubber that I picked up somewhere along the way. I don't remember where, but it's about 3/16 of an inch thick, and I just traced out what we had here for our shape onto here with a pin, marked it on there, and then cut it out with just some big old giant scissors that I have laying around the shop. So got that done. Ended up with 3 gaskets that are pretty rough looking, but doesn't really matter what those are going to look like either, because they're, again, those aren't getting seen, but we can get one in there like that and kind of see now. Once that's in place and the outer skin is on, and this is screwed down here tight, that's going to that point clamp this into place where now this isn't rattling, moving around, making all kinds of noise, and it also is going to press down on that rubber, which is going to make a seal. So that's what I did there to be able to accomplish that. The next thing that we need to do is we need to have a seal at the cab. So I cut out 3 more pieces like this. I haven't pushed holes in all these yet because I wanted to show you guys kind of what they look like here first. But so I just cut out some strips, same thing, traced out on my little piece over there, cut out with some scissors. Now the one thing that I can show you on this real quick here is after you cut it out with the scissors, it looks pretty rough. Let's see if I can get this close enough where you guys can see it. That edge along there doesn't look very good. But you can take the edge and clean it up with just the right angle grinder and a flap wheel. And it doesn't take much pressure or anything like that. You can just hold the grinder down. And it really does clean up the edge quite a bit. Hopefully you guys can pick that up. If not, then I'll flash you in a piece here before and after. But anyways, so now that that is done, the last step before we can bolt this thing on is to be able to just poke some holes in there so we can get our bolts to go through. I just happen to have a round punch in my little punch press over there, so I used what I had already in there. I didn't even check to see if sizes or anything like that because it's going to have plenty of rubber still around there to seal. So my thought was, whatever, we'll just stick it in there and be done. So don't forget to be able to have a hole here in the center for your wire to go through. So we've got our wire coming through, and then holes there for, you know, the bolts to go through, of course. So now we can take this thing over and, well, I got to punch a couple more holes, but we can take these over there after that, and I can stick them on the cab. Well, I went ahead and stuck them all back on there and got some wires hooked up to them and got it all kind of rigged up here to my jump box. So let's flip the switch and see what they look like. Hell yeah. One more step closer to having Old Crow back on the road.